What's up, guys? Welcome back to another episode of the Talkin Football podcast. It's been a while, but we're back. I appreciate all the support on all the shorts that I've been posting in the meantime since I haven't recorded a long video in a while. But we're back and we're ready to rock. We're going to do as you can tell by the title, we're going to do a championship reaction video today. Let's hit the intro and let's get right into it. All right, so Championship Sunday. Well, this is going to go up on Wednesday, but I recorded this on Monday. Championship Sunday, two games, very different. One was a blowout. One was a very tight game that was fought very closely up until basically the last play. So we're going to start. Let's start with the NFC. That was the first game. We had Washington, who was the 6th seed, at Philly, who was the 2 seed. Philadelphia dominated this game, and it got ugly really late. Washington, for what it's worth, they didn't start terribly. I think they played a pretty good game until they couldn't control the run game anymore. And that's kind of where Philly took advantage. Philly, I think they had 6 total rushing touchdowns on the day, which is bonkers to think about. Absolutely insane. It also kind of goes to show what Jalen Hurts has done during this playoff run. It's been all the ground, and that's okay. That's not a bad thing. In the playoffs, it's all about running the ball and their defense. And Philly's been excellent for both of those there. Jalen Hurts doesn't have to do anything, and that's not a bad thing. And and I'm a Giants fan, and I'm saying that I think the way that Jalen Hurts has been playing, and he's played okay football, and that's all they need him to do because Saquon goes bonkers every single week. Gainwell plays pretty well for what it's worth, and their defense just smothers whoever they're playing. We saw that with LA. Jalen Carter was dominating, and then of course yesterday where Jaden Daniels kind of didn't really have a lot of time because, again, Carter, Davis, Nolan Smith. You know what? Nolan Smith had a great game. He's not being talked about enough. Nolan Smith was absolutely phenomenal, in my opinion, yesterday. He really set the edge really nicely there. Because they look on the outside. How many times have we seen Jaden Daniels roll out of the pocket to his right? Nolan Smith didn't really allow that to happen that much. So kudos to him on a really nicely played game. So Philly dominated this game from start to finish. So let's react to how they played. First off, that first drive by Washington really set the tone for the Phillies defense. They said, look, we cannot let this happen again. And for what it's worth, they didn't really happen again. Washington had I want to say an 18-play drive, and it resulted in a field goal. That's how good Washington is. 18 plays, that's how it opens up. It took off around a half of the quarter-ish, I want to say. Philly, next play. Literally the next play, 1-play touchdown to Saquon. That is how you do football. You answer. The negative to that was that their defense had just had to come back on the field. But luckily, the commercial break was a little bit long, I'll be honest, and allowed Philly's defense to get a break. But to that point, Washington, who runs a lot of no huddle, they weren't really able to do so because after an exhausting 18-play drive, they had to come back on the field as well. And they run a lot of tempo. Philly's defense did not allow any of that. So I'll give them a lot of credit there. Vic Fangio, great game plan. Cooper DeJean was fantastic. Great in coverage, great returning punts as well. He really had a nice game. And that's what Philly does. They draft young guys, they play out of their mind, and they get to these big games. They get to the playoffs, and now we've seen in the last 3 years they made 2 Super Bowls. Whether they can win this one is a different question, but Philly, they definitely played well, and that's something that I'd like to see them. If they played this way, if they play the way they did yesterday or 3 days ago, depending on when you're seeing this, or however long ago, depending on when you're seeing this, they should dominate Kansas City. They should, because they pounded the rock. Jalen Hurts played very good football, and their defense was fantastic. And keep in mind, they're without Cam Jurgens, and they were basically forced to put Landon Dickerson to center, who hasn't played center all year. And that shows a lot. When you're starting, the center orchestrates that offense. He identifies, what's going to come. For Philly, he's the tush push guy. And we saw yesterday, the tush push, at least from my perspective, was not nearly as effective with Landon Dickerson at center. It wasn't, because they got no traction. That's not a thing against Landon Dickerson. He is not built for those kind of situations. It's not a bad thing, because he's more used to just kind of pushing the pile forward. When you're the center and for the Eagles and you're doing the tush push, you need to get underground leverage because if you can push that first defensive tackle back, it's so much easier to just kind of swarm. With Landon Dickerson, wasn't a lot of stuff there. Luckily, they were able to push Hurts forward, and Hurts is not an easy guy to bring down. But to that point, it looked not as efficient or as effective. But I still think that they played a good game even without Cam Jurgens. And AJ Brown was really good. He played a really good, nice game, nice bounce back from his last few weeks of play. Saquon Barkley, I mean, he is an animal. He is unbelievable, the stuff he's able to do. Defensively, like I said, I mean, they had so many guys. Jalen Carter was really nice. Darius Slay played a pretty good game. DeJean was great, in my opinion. Zach Bond played a good game. I mean, just everyone contributes to that defense, and it's just built really well. So kudos to Howie Roseman for building that defense. And that says a lot because I really don't like Howie Roseman or Philly at all. Let's move on to Washington and how they played. So Washington, all right. I understand that Washington became America's sweethearts, and everyone's like, oh, we need Washington to win this game. And I understand that. I was rooting for Washington too. I cannot get behind a Philly Super Bowl. I can't. So they come out, and like I said, 18-play drive. But let's look at that drive. 3rd and long. They went for it on 4th down a couple times. It's like that stuff kind of started to build up. They put themselves into 3rd and long formations or 3rd and long plays way too often. That's not something that is sustainable. And they did that for almost the entire game. They were just in 3rd and long all the time until they decided that, you know what, maybe we should start to run the ball, which they did. And they did it well. But, here's the thing. Washington's offense is very, I don't want to say predictable, but it's easy to decipher. They ran on that first drive, and I noticed it. They ran, I think, 3 or 4 times an empty set for Daniels with I think Robinson or Eckler, whoever was in, motioned out to the outside in the one-on-one. I mean, really? Like that's what you're showing? I know it's your first drive and you're not going to show your cards too much, but that's what you're showing, like, hey, Philly, look at what we can do. We just dominated Detroit. We're going to dominate you now. You didn't dominate. You just did such bland offense. And Washington's scheme relies a lot on quick throws across the middle and screens. That's what they do. They run screens. And I'll be honest, I am not a football genius, but when it comes down to it, I can say they're going to run a screen here, and they run a screen there. Their offense was a little bit too predictable, and I'm not saying they should have been aggressive because that stuff is not going to be consistent. Against Washington, they were poised, they were confident, they were relatively aggressive. I think they were more aggressive in that game than they were in this game, and anyone who's watching could see that. That first drive, and I keep going back to that because that's what set the tone. You have an 18-play drive, and you get a field goal. No, you got to punch that in. You got to punch that sucker in, punch them in the mouth, and that's how you start. After that first drive, I mean, they did score again. McLaurin had that touchdown, but what else was there? There was nothing really of substance that you could to grasp. I mean, Daniels, he didn't play a bad game. This is not a Jaden Daniels at all. I think for what it's worth, he looked a little scared, and he's a rookie in Lincoln Financial. No one is going to go in there and easily beat the Eagles. It's just not something that happens. I think he played a good game. Not a good game. He played okay. But this game, not on him. Their offensive line was horrific, absolutely horrific. And their turnovers, man, they had like 3 or 4 fumbles, no picks, all fumbles. That's poor, really, really bad, obviously. But when you're doing that, you need to just kind of level up your game a little bit. That stuff is not sustainable. You need to be able to move the ball, and if you're going to lose it, punt. You can't fumble. Fumbles suck. Because you're like, because fumbles are so avoidable. Interceptions are a little bit different because you're either, what are you throwing that for? Unlucky tip, or you're like, that's just an amazing defense. They disguised that really well. Daniels didn't throw any picks. They had 3 or 4 fumbles. I think they had 1 on a kick return. Eckler fumbled once. I think De'Ami Brown fumbled once, so that's 3. They had 4 turnovers on the day. And it felt like they were all avoidable. On the kick return, put the ball away. You see a swarm of green coming at you, and your white jerseys and red pants are not blocking that well. Why are you running like no? When you're about to go into a big pile of Eagle players, hold it like this. Avoid the punch out. He didn't do that. Ball came out. They jumped on it. Eagles ball. That is the kind of stuff that they cannot afford. And that's the stuff that happened. Really, and their defense. Don't even get me started there. Philly knew how to dominate this defense. They play deep and then they go underneath. How many times? I mean, I was watching this. I'm like, AJ Brown's wide open in the flat. Goddard's wide open in the flat. Saquon's open in the flat. They got to cover up, and that's the problem because they ran so much man. And when you're going up against man beaters like your mesh concepts, or your slants, your zigs if you're playing Madden or something like that, it's easier to decipher. But they played a little bit more zone and that is something that cost them a little bit. They put Lattimore on AJ Brown in man coverage situations. I read a report that said that I think they said he's going to be tracking with him, but they're not going to run as much man, and they didn't. They ran some zone. But when you're so man heavy for the entire year, you almost rely on man coverage for your offense, or for your defense, and then you just suddenly switch to zone in to this point the biggest game of your season. Like, you almost feel like you should just stick to your guns and go down fighting than going down running your cheap, weak zone defense. If you're going to run zone defense, you need – and I know there's always a downfall to zone defense because if they're running zone, you just find an empty spot. And that's what happens at every single zone play. If you're running Tampa 2, outsides are going to be open, and then there's like that precise spot right in the middle of the field where you can find maybe like a tight end on a seam. If you're running a zone blitz, that middle wide open. It just depends on where they're coming. If you run cover 3, seams are open. There's always going to be something. With man coverage, it's not really like that. If I'm Washington, if I'm Dan Quinn and Joe Witt, I'm probably sticking to my guns a little bit more. I would have stuck with what worked. And I understand, obviously Mike Sandstrel is not going to defend Devonta Smith because he can't. Sandstrel's overrated, in my opinion. He played well this season, but let's be real. It's Mike Sandstrel. And Lattimore was getting cooked in one-on-one. I mean, I will say, though, when they started to fight, Brown and Lattimore, that was very entertaining and very cool. Well, not cool. You know what I mean. That's the stuff that we need to see more in the NFL. Just rivalries getting ignited again. That's the stuff we need to see. Washington, you got blown out. I think Philly could have put their foot off the gas a little bit, but they didn't. It's a division matchup, and it's tough. Nothing you can really do there. Philly dominates. They're the NFC champions. They're going to New Orleans. Now, this is the game of the day, game of the championship Sunday, whatever you want to call it. This was the one everyone was looking forward to. Chiefs, Bills. We all know the Chiefs. We all know the cheapest 15-2 season of all time. I'm not going to say that they didn't deserve it. They got awarded and for poor play with a really easy schedule and fluke plays that wouldn't happen to anybody else. And of course, your obvious, the refs didn't help them. Yes, we get that. But you got to admit, Kansas City played a really good game. There was an asterisk on that, but Kansas City outplayed Buffalo. If you look at the game, and I know you say besides those select plays, Kansas City outplayed Buffalo. They did. And if you think otherwise, I don't know what game you're watching. Kansas City I would play Buffalo. Because for some reason, Kansas City turns it on in the postseason. It's like a mental thing. I don't even get it. Mahomes played unbelievably well. Throwing on the money, he knew what he was doing. We did not see Dan Mahomes in the offseason once. That's not true. Maybe a few times. But the way he played yesterday was special. Also, the first time Kansas City has eclipsed 30 points on the season. No better time to do it than against your now probably your biggest rival at this point, right? Buffalo, they took a little bit too long to get going, and it took them a suspiciously long time to realize maybe we should run with James Cook. Go with what was working. I don't know why that took so long to be like, oh yeah, let's do James Cook because he started to dominate. Come on now, you got to put James Cook in earlier. You got to, or you got to give him more touches. They did, and late in the game, he was balling. Same thing for Mac Hollins. And I'll just say this, believe me or don't, I was sitting down watching that game, and Mac Hollins had like that 30-yard catch down the seam. I was like, you know what? He's playing a lot like Gabe Davis right now. Like the way he's playing right now reminds me of Gabe Davis. Literally 10 seconds later, Jim Nantz says Gabe Davis. He's playing like Gabe Davis right now. I'm like, there you go. That's the talking football I know. That's the talking football I know. Okay, before we break down how each team played, I want to talk about the refs really quickly and how they managed to call this game. Okay. There were bad calls in favor of Kansas City. We all know that. That 4th and 1 tush push, that was a first down, no doubt. The weird fluky play on the next 4th and short, whatever it was, where Allen was off his back foot sending a prayer for Kincaid. It was dropped, and there's a flag, and then there wasn't a flag. Little sketch. I don't get that. Was there just no flag in general? Was it a mistake? Jim Nantz does not make mistakes like that. So I'm assuming that there was an actual flag, and that it just got picked up because what people are saying. And after I saw this headline, I was like, you know what? I believe that. I think it was that Kansas City, or excuse me, I think it was that the refs saw that Kincaid was about to catch it, had their flags ready, were about to throw it, and then he said, oh, they dropped it. No flag. Because it would have been on Buffalo, I'm pretty sure. And they were like, you know what, let's not. Because we don't want that to count. Something to think about there. Now, the one that's debated the most, and the one that I'm actually fighting against, was the Xavier Worthy catch. Respectfully, it was a catch. I don't know how you could say it wasn't. I understand it hit the ground, but it did not move based on what I saw. Here, he made the catch, and it was actually intercepted first. It was intercepted first, and then it hit the ground while it was transitioning from, I think it's Cole Bishop to Xavier Worthy. It's a catch because Bishop had possession, and then as he rolled over, Worthy took it. That's a catch, and that's a first down. Saying that it hit the ground does not mean that it's incomplete. We have seen this before where it hits the ground, but the ball does not move. It's a catch. That's what I'm saying. I'm saying it was a catch. I think there's reasonable explanations for both sides. Don't get me wrong. No doubt in my mind, you could say it was a pick. You could say it was a catch. You could say it was incomplete. I think it's a catch for Worthy. I think that was a good call. So we can argue about that, but it was a catch. Sorry, not sorry. Overall, though, I don't know how many more games I could watch where the refs decide this stuff. I'm going to go back to that tush push where Josh Allen clearly had the first down. The last clip that CBS Sports showed us, the one that Gene Steratore even said, from this angle, this is a first down. It's clearly a first down. The ball passed the line, and it's a first. But they did not call it a first. I don't get that. You gotta call that. You gotta call that a first down. It's too big of a moment to say no. That's just not. If I'm watching the Super Bowl and there are calls against Philly, in favor of Kansas City, I look right there. Look right there. You see that, right? That is a Giants helmet. Okay. I mean, you don't see it now, but there's another Giants helmet there. There's a little bit. There's a glare. Giants helmets there. You have Manningham up there. You have two pictures of Barkley. Know where my allegiance is before I say this. I will be so upset if for Philly, and I will feel bad for them. And I'm actually rooting for Kansas City in the Super Bowl. But if there is a call in favor of Kansas City, an egregious call, I am just going to be very upset. The refs have caused too many headaches in favor of Kansas City. It's got to stop. Be even. There are calls that, and the thing that irritates me is this: there are clearly calls that they make that are penalties. Like, don't get me wrong. I mean, if there's holding, it's a penalty. Holding on the offense, like the Bills' offensive line, they call holding. The Chiefs are doing the same thing. You got to call holding there too. I agree for Buffalo, but you got to do the same thing for Kansas City. If there's pass interference one side, pass interference has got to be even. You got to make that even, and that's something they don't do. Make it fair. Until that point, I don't know how bearable the Chiefs Super Bowl will be. Buffalo, how'd they play? Okay. Josh Allen played like Daniel Jones in the first half. I don't know what it was. I don't know what he was trying to do too much. I have no idea what it was, but he was playing terribly. He should have had 2 picks on that opening drive. And that was really poor. There are plays where Karlaftis is running towards him and about to smack him to the sideline. And Allen, you're out of the pocket. All you have to do, a little toss to the sideline. Allen decides to throw it like 50 yards down the field to like Khalil Shakir or like Ty Johnson. Like, what? It's not even like it's Matt Hollins. Like, Hollins is like one of your taller receivers, or like Kincaid or Knox. You threw it up there for like Ty Johnson or Shakir. Like, what are you doing? Why are you doing that? You're hurting your arm by doing that. Just throw it out of bounds. It took him a while to get going, and there were a lot of like throws that he had, and that's what you see out of Josh Allen. But the Josh Allen we saw in that game was the Josh Allen from a few years ago, not the polished, turnover-free Josh Allen we've seen usually. He got into a rhythm late, and he did finish with a pretty good line. And Buffalo didn't play a bad game. Excuse me. Buffalo's offense did not play a bad game. They pounded the rock. They got the ball when they needed to, or they moved the ball when they needed to. Their offense played fine. Their defense. I have so many things I can say about this because Kansas City, to their credit, ran a Madden offense on that last drive, and they couldn't stop it. How many times did we see Kansas City run the mesh man beater with a check down? Come on now. It's 2 drags here. It's 2 underneath drag routes. The point, it's almost like to make a pick almost when they come into the middle. And then you have a check down underneath. Someone's got to be there. Come on. How many times did we see Kansas City go into a tight formation where Mahomes fakes it to Pacheco now, or Hunt, whoever the running back is at that point, and Mahomes takes off with it, and he has the option to either run with it or he has the option to throw it to the check down, who is the running back, who he just play action to. I mean, come on now. They ran very, like, the very similar plays. There's no reason for Buffalo to lose this game. They also held Kelsey to like 2 for 19. I don't think he got another catch after he had that 12-yard like curl. The defense, man, and that last drive makes me want to bang my head against a wall because it's like it's stoppable, and they couldn't stop it. When you're when the game is on the line, your Super Bowl is on the line, and you come out with that? Are you serious? Come on now. That was poor. Offense played well, defense did not. And you know what? I will say though, I'm happy at least that it didn't come down to like last year Bass missed a kick. This year it came down to Kansas City getting a first down. I don't know. Kansas City. Okay. I understand that everyone's upset. I get that. But let's be real here. They played a good game. Mahomes played a very good game. Um, I think their offensive line, for what it's worth, played a pretty good game. Worthy was phenomenal yesterday. I guess I didn't even know. I mean, maybe call me a casual. I didn't even realize that Juju was still on the Chiefs. I thought that he was a free agent or on the practice squad. I didn't even realize that he was back with them, like actually back. Uh, he was great, Juju. Had a really good game, but Worthy was like the top dog there. Other than that, their offense was all right. Defensively, though, give Spags all the flowers. I mean, really do. His blitzes are disguised so well, and I think the big thing is discipline. When you're running corner blitzes, almost like I would say like 85% of the teams in the NFL, like I would say around like 28 of them, except for a select few. How many times do we see they're lined up perfectly, and then there's a hard count, and then they go for that. Whoever's in the slot, man, they just book it right, and they understand the snap count, and that stuff is so important to their success. Those nickel blitzes are impossible to beat. Chris Jones was phenomenal. Mike Dana, I believe his name is, the defensive end. He had a really good game too. Karlaftis, I'm a big Karlaftis guy. He was great too. There was a lot of good things that Kansas City did on both sides of the ball. And the big thing is they dominated the line of scrimmage. They dominated. For what it's worth, now there were plays where Buffalo gave them a run for their money. But if we're being honest, Kansas City dominated the line of scrimmage, and that's what allowed them to win this game. If we're being real. That's how we're going to end this episode. I hope you guys enjoyed. I know it's been a really long time since I've uploaded. Thank you so much for tuning in and watching this. I don't know what we're doing for the Super Bowl yet, but I'll probably have an announcement for that soon. Thank you guys for watching. This is Talking Football. That's what I got to say about that.